Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 611. Ultimate Scapegoat. Mei Shuiyan's killing intent had reached a point of insanity. Since you all are pushing things to this extent, then don't blame me for not being righteous. This venerable shall utterly kill and decimate all of you. There will not be the slightest bit of mercy for you. Did everyone really think that the Lord of Tianfa is someone who doesn't know how to kill? Zi Jinghong, who was watching the scene, remained unmoved, his face without a shred of emotion. He acted as if he could not see or hear the noisy avalanche and his surroundings at all. In that moment, he slammed down his palms and shouted, "Blood ocean mutual perishment. Burn the bridges and press forward. Kill!" 3 more figures dashed out, splitting into 3 directions as they charged towards Mei Shuiyan. A short distance away, another person howled and jumped into the air, turning into a streak of lightning with his sword again. If she really took the force of 2 consecutive terrible explosions head-on, even if Mei Shuiyan had heaven-defying capabilities, it was impossible to avoid being severely injured. In an instant, all the remaining experts rushed forward. Zi Jinghong and Xiao Wei Cheng's swords flashed with cruelty and the excitement of vengeance. Although the price was heavy, they would finally be able to kill this Lord of Tianfa. But just in this moment, an unexpected anomaly appeared. An incomprehensible and unimaginably queer anomaly appeared. Another streak of dazzling light appeared in the sky, flashing abruptly and briefly like short-lived lightning. Complete silence followed it. Before anyone could react, the Supreme Realm expert, who was suspended in mid-air and storing power, suddenly fell from the sky with a savage roar, perfectly dropping back where he was standing a moment ago. Among the crowd, an eye-catching bloody wound could be seen on his throat. Someone had actually killed him with a single sword just as his power accumulation had reached a critical point. The person who'd killed him had grasped the timing to an extremely immaculate level, because the expert's energy had accumulated to an extreme point already, and it was on the brink of eruption. But with his life ended so abruptly, the energy instantly went out of control as he fell back down to the ground. With a loud boom, a huge explosion rang out. The self-detonation of a Supreme Realm expert, was it possible for it to be something small? Even with Mei Shuiyan's shocking cultivation level, she still received some injuries from taking one of the explosions head-on, not to mention these people who were far from her level of strength. In addition, the sequence of events had been too strange and unexpected, and no one was prepared to face such a situation. Who would have expected that the kamikaze attack of their own expert would actually be used against them? As a result, tragedy ensued. Utter and terrible tragedy. This situation was as if one fired off a missile, only for it to fall at the highest point in the sky and drop back down on them. Boom! A cacophony of terrible cries. The scene right now, how could it be simply described with just the word terrible? Xiao Wei Cheng's Supreme Golden City's men had fled far away, and only the remnants of the shockwave hit them. But the position that Zi Jinghong, who was under a heavy protection of escorts, was in was practically at the forefront of the point of impact. In that instant, he was sent flying by the powerful blast. At the same time, another 7, 8 illusory blood sea experts accompanied his acrobatics through the air. Only by revolving their Xian Qi to protect their bodies in midair were they able to avoid sustaining heavy injuries. However, these people's internal organs had all been shocked. Blood flowed faintly from their lips. Although it sounded devastating, this blast was still much weaker than the one that Mei Shuiyan had received from the multiple experts self-detonating together. Even the three experts surrounding Mei Shuayan could not help but fall speechless. Feck. What's going on? There wasn't such a move in the blood ocean mutual perishment. Mei Shuayan's body shook, and with a speed akin to lightning, she escaped from the encirclement of the three experts. Who is it? Just who is? Roll out here for this, daddy. Zi Jinghong crawled up to his feet. The first thing he did upon recovering from the shock was to scream aloud in rage. Son of a beach! Which bastard is it who lacks morals like so? Hiding around and making this kind of shady and sinister moves. What kind of capability is that? A mocking laughter rang out from somewhere in response. As if it were saying, a shady move that could affect so many supreme-level experts and characters above the supreme level. How enjoyable! Following that, an incorporeal white shadow flashed across the sky with a whooshing sound, disappearing towards the right side. From the looks of it, the shadow had disappeared behind a large boulder. At the same time, Jun Moxie's voice rang out in Mei Shuayan's ears. Come. Mei Shuayan cocked her head slightly and quickly utilized her movement technique. With a quick step, her body morphed into a white shadow, taking advantage of the chaos to shoot towards the huge boulder on the right as well. Coincidentally, the avalanche that Mei Shuayan had caused earlier had finally arrived with great gusto. The already chaotic scene turned even messier, with countless new elements. Chase. Zi Jinghong and Xiao Weicheng had nearly ruptured their lungs from sheer anger. The two covered tens of zhang with each step as they chased after Mei Shuayan. Their faces livid with rage, as if they wanted to devour anyone in their paths alive. Although they had suffered some casualties, their dead and injured were not that heavy. On the other hand, it was an undeniable fact that the Venerable Mei had been injured rather heavily. If they couldn't seize this chance to get rid of this tumor, when she recovers her strength, all of them would be completely finished. As for the blood ocean mutual perishment maneuver, it could only be used in circumstances where the opponent was not prepared for it. Against an opponent who already knew how to defend against it, it was nothing more than a move that damaged one's own strength. After all, every time it was used, they would lose at least one or more Supreme Realm experts. Even if the illusory Blood Sea's foundations were stronger, it was not a loss they could afford to make in the long term. Feck. Are you serious? The Supreme Realm assassin suddenly felt the hairs on his body standing upright as a chill ran down his spine. The feck? Why does it feel like the earth is suddenly collapsing towards me? It can't be so coincidental, right? This is so fecking unreal. Aren't you guys fighting just fine among yourself? I was only enjoying the show. How did this disaster turn to me all of a sudden? At least give me a frickin' heads up first. Seeing a large group of experts suddenly rush in his direction, the king of assassins, Chu Qi Hun's spirit nearly fled from his body. There was nowhere to hide in this area. As long as someone came over, they would immediately see me. How am I supposed to live? Feck. Although a few experts had died, just the ones that were rushing towards him were enough to kill 8 or 10 of him. At this time, a shady voice sounded out suddenly. Just the few of you trash want to catch me. Chu Qi Hun. Do you have that capability? Hooey. This voice practically sounded out right beside Chu Qi Hun, causing him to jump with a start. The voice was so uncannily similar to his that even he thought that he'd said those words. In that moment, he could not help but shiver as all his hairs stood up on its ends. Heavens ah! You're toying me to death. Chu Qi Hun felt his chest constrict, and he nearly fainted on the spot. That voice was like a clear beacon in the dark. All the experts of the two holy lands immediately dashed towards his boulder like a pack of crows. My God! My dear mother! Supreme Chu nearly cried as he jumped up. He did not even have time to see who was trying to frame him. In that moment, he morphed into a white shadow as he fled with all his might. After all, escaping was the most important thing right now. Chu Qi Hun's only thought right now was that he was truly dead meat. This daddy had become a scapegoat again. And this time, it was even more ridiculous. With a single stroke, the sins of someone who'd provoked the two holy lands had been passed on to him. This kind of life. There's no way to live it. Great heavens, ah! Dear earth, ah! Why is my life so bitter? Chu Qi Hun was like a stray dog fleeing in panic from the butchers, and a fish escaping from the dragnet. At this moment, he was fleeing at an extreme speed, one that caused others to gasp with astonishment. Even Jun Moxie, who was hiding nearby, could not help but to sigh in amazement. How quick! Feck your mother! Chu Qi Hun! It's really you! You wretched creature! You cursed son of a beach! Black-hearted scum that deserves to be struck by lightning! My supreme golden city/illusory blood sea will not rest until you are dead. Xi Jinghong and Xiao Wei Cheng instantly burst out with a slew of expletives at the same time. Their tone was as if they wanted to spit out a mouthful of blood. The two were so enraged that they could not sit still. Why must a seamless plan that had been intricately laid out by the two factions be ruined at the hands of this savage beast? Could this damnable scum be a plague that the heavens had sent to specifically deal with their three holy lands? If one looked again, Mei Shuayan had already disappeared from sight long ago whilst utilizing her unmatched movement technique. With her speed, was it even possible to catch up with her again? Even if she was injured, it was still unlikely to catch her. Besides, this was not a common path used by the Dongfang family. Even the ghosts won't be able to tell which direction she went in. Split up and pursue? That wouldn't be a chase anymore, but sending lambs to the slaughter. Xi Jinghong's eyes had turned completely red from rage. In that moment, his anger soared to the heavens as he declared loudly with a voice akin to thunder. Chu Qi Hun. This seat swears to the heavens and earth that your life is mine. If this seat does not kill you, this seat shall cease to be a man. Xiao Wei Cheng had also been angered to the point where his hair were standing on its ends. The two did not even discuss as they led their own experts to chase like a black cloud after the lone fleeing figure. Chu Qi Hun. I must kill you. Ah 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 ah. At this time, the avalanche had already rumbled through the area. The entire place was stacked high with snow, and snow waves which towered several hundred zhang into the air could be seen with a ghastly snowstorm blowing wildly around it. The scene was as grand as a painting. After a long time, the earth's rumbling finally began to cease. Near the boulder that Chu Qi Hun was originally hiding in, not more than 5 zhang away, two heads poked out of the snow behind a large rock and looked around warily. These two heads belonged to Jun Moxie and Mei Shuayan. How scary! Jun Moxie stuck out his tongue tentatively, his face filled with lingering fear. His hand was plastered on Mei Shuayan's jade-like back, and he only removed it now. Large amounts of pure heaven-earth spiritual qi had already temporarily suppressed Mei Shuayan's injuries. How did you know that that person was Chu Qi Hun? Mei Shuayan asked with curiosity, her eyes revealing a bit of shock. When I arrived earlier, I saw that you were still practicing your swordsmanship, so I came over to take a better look. Anyway, I noticed that fellow's sword, which was quite unique. The Autumn Dew Invincible Sword. It's very easily recognizable. And Jun Moxie laughed proudly, without a shred of humility. In this world, the only person who possesses that level of stealth and anti-tracking skills, apart from me, is him. There's absolutely no one else who can achieve that level of skill. Trust me. Even you are not capable of it. That's true. That person's subterfuge techniques are truly shocking. He was actually able to hide himself so close to the fight, and yet was not discovered by Zi Jinghong and Xiao Wei Cheng at all. Such a level of hiding skill, if it was spreaded out, will be enough to shock the world. I, too, am ashamed of my skills when compared to him. Mei Shuayan praised. With all these clues lined up, if that person was not the assassin supreme Chu Qi Hun, who else could it be? Jun Moxie laughed wryly. But, you using him like this, isn't it somewhat immoral? Although that person's movement technique is not bad, and is even comparable to ours, his strength is probably only around the supreme realm, comparable to yours. Mei Shuayan smiled lightly, her face resembling that of spring flowers blossoming. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 612. Amazing Chu Qi Hun. Jun Moxie stared blankly into the distance. Relax. He definitely won't die. Didn't you see how fast he ran? For an assassin to reach the supreme realm, how could he die so easily? Besides, that fellow can't be considered as a good person. Don't worry about him. Let's leave this place first. Your injuries have only been temporarily suppressed by me. When we find a safer place, I'll help you treat it properly. Be more careful next time. A self-detonation attack by Supreme Realm experts is not any joking matter. The two departed casually, happily continuing on their way. Their journey for the next few days was light and leisurely, with nary a sign of their pursuers. The force that the three Holy Lands had sent out this time could be said to be extremely strong in both power and scale. In total, they had 90 experts who stood at the peak of the current generation. With such a terrifying strength, it was sufficient to rend the skies and shake the ground of this world. Yet, they had only suffered losses after losses, paying the lives of their generals and soldiers throughout this mission. The illusory Blood Sea had suffered the least casualty, but they had still lost a total of 6 people. 17 experts from Supreme Golden City had died, while the entire group of 30 from the elusive world of immortals had been completely wiped out, without a single survivor. Of the 90 experts that had set out, only 37 remained. And among these people, 4 of them were crippled in the hands of the Jun family, while another 8 experts had suffered injuries of varying degrees. Even Xiao Wei Cheng's body was sporting numerous new ugly scars. With their current strength, if they were still adamant about pursuing and killing Mei Shuayan, it would be equivalent to seeking death. Thus, Zi Jinghong and Xiao Wei Cheng simultaneously came to the same decision to switch to another target, the assassin supreme Chu Qi Hun. The Supreme Golden City immediately passed an order: kill Chu Qi Hun at all costs. Illusory Blood Sea was not slow either, as they issued a Blood Ocean kill order. As long as Chu Qi Hun was not killed, there would be no rest. When the elusive world of immortals soon received news that all of the people they'd sent out had been completely wiped out, and that Chu Qi Hun was actually heavily involved in that affair, they also grew incredibly incensed. Without bothering to investigate further, a kill order was issued immediately as well. The 3 Holy Lands was now bounded by a hatred for a common enemy, Chu Qi Hun. In a very short time, Chu Qi Hun's name became infamous throughout the entire Xian continent. There were no competition for the illustriousness of his name. His fame was awe-inspiring and his notoriety towered to the skies. In just a few short days, the name Chu Qi Hun had already become a well-known name throughout every household in the continent. Everyone could not help but to cluck their tongues with shock and admiration. This supreme assassin was simply too fecking awesome. Too fecking splendid. With the might of a single man, this fellow challenged all three holy lands at the same time. Numerous powerful supreme-level experts and even experts above the supreme level of strength had all met their end at the hands of this savage. What a true ferocious individual. This was too crazy. Chu Qi Hun's fame grew with incredible speed, quickly reaching an unprecedented shocking level. All the assassins in history, no matter how glamorous their kill score was, all dimmed in comparison with Chu Qi Hun. Chu Qi Hun could now be considered as an ancestor-level character in the assassin's circle. With a single step, he'd somehow realized his greatest dream, becoming the #1 assassin in history. Surpassing the ancients and amazing the world. For the last 10,000 years, who dared to challenge the three holy lands up front in such a manner? Not to mention provoking all three. Just challenging a single one of the holy lands was an extremely unthinkable thing. And now, their compatriot, the mighty Chu Qi Hun, had managed to smack three terrifying beehives with a single swing of his stick. Even if the battle results were not considered, just that level of courage, that level of spirit, was unparalleled in history and will never be broken again in the future. A man needs be like Chu Qi Hun, awe-inspiring and matchless throughout the world. Looking disdainfully upon all who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him, ancient and modern. An outstanding assassin in a league all of his own. In a short period of time, such a poem had spread through the continent as the common folks eagerly passed on praise of his legendary deeds. Chu Qi Hun's name had become a hot topic among all who sit together and convene. Hey, are there any latest updates about the supreme assassin? No, but that fellow is truly quite something. To actually have the guts to feck all three holy lands in the *** at the same time. This courage. This handsomeness. Big brother here is impressed to death. If there's no news, that means that he isn't dead. Even the three holy lands can't do anything about him. The speaker's voice grew hushed all of a sudden. What would you know? Supreme Chu is the #1 assassin in history. The three holy lands are very formidable. But, are they comparable to their ancestors? Indigo blue is extracted from the indigo plant. But it is bluer than the plant it comes from. Chu Qi Hun is a man who'd surpassed his predecessors. Even water is not as cold as Grand Assassin Chu. That's true. When one reaches Chu Qi Hun's level of strength, there's indeed nothing to be fearful about. A truly formidable man. This big brother has never heard of such a savage person actually existing in this world. This is too fecking satisfying, challenging the three holy lands alone. Ah! Just thinking about it is enough to cause this big brother to shiver with agitation. Exactly. Chu Qi Hun truly has guts. He truly has too much guts. How manly. Do you all know why Chu Qi Hun wanted to kill the three holy lands people? A middle-aged man asked in a secretive manner. Why? Hurry up. Tell us. Everyone grew excited. You guys. You're truly ill-informed. This secret. Looks like I'm the only one who knows. After rushing for such a long journey, my tongue is so parched. And I'm almost starving to death. How tiring. That person sighed and moaned as he sat down arrogantly. Waiter. Quickly bring me some of your best dishes and wine. If you're slow, This daddy here will wring your neck in two. Give me the most expensive and tasty stuff. With a loud bang, several men slapped the table together and shouted to the waiter, fighting to treat the meal. Seeing that you guys are so sincere, I'll let you in on the secret. The man narrowed his eyes mysteriously and stuck out two fingers. There are actually two reasons behind this matter. First, Chu Qi Hun had a childhood sweetheart. She was extremely beautiful, but somehow, her beauty was discovered by the people of the illusory Blood Sea. Thus, they sent someone to take a look themselves. With that one look, they were instantly mesmerized. So that's how it is, it's actually a conflict over a beauty. Everyone gasped with realization. So they moved and snatched her away. But after bringing her back, everyone realized that there was only one girl. And so many of them, how would they split her among so many people? Even if they had the patience, she might not be able to endure. As a result, a fight broke out. If it was just a fight, it wouldn't be a big deal. But even the Holy Land's Lord had to come out to stop the fight. In the midst of doing that, he happened to glance at that girl. AI, the beauty of the girl was really too moving, enough to stun even the deities. One had to say, that beauty is truly a source of disaster. The man shook his head and sighed. What happened after that? The crowd urged anxiously. After that? She was naturally taken away by that lord and kept for himself. Every night, there would be strange sounds coming from his chambers. The man smiled perversely, his voice low and thin, causing everyone to lean inwards catch his words. The circle of black heads was clustered together like a basket of vegetables in the market, with countless flies sitting on them. Regardless of whether one was a man or a woman, humans were gossipy creatures by nature. Their spirits were also filled with curiosity. But, for some reason, news of this scandal was leaked, and the other two Holy Lands came to know of it as well. The other two lords of the Holy Lands paid the girl a visit out of curiosity. AI, one really has to admit, that girl's beauty was truly too charming. Beauty truly invites troubles. Ah. After that, he. What do you all think happened? The man leaned back comfortably on his chair and smiled slyly. They fought? No, they didn't fight. I don't know the details of what went down as well, but the three lords all left happily together. And from what I heard, they had a very good time as well. Things were very calm and peaceful after that. Oh. A chorus of gasps rang out as everyone looked at each other in understanding. Finally, Chu Qi Hun came to know about this matter. Everyone, if something like this happened to your loved ones, what would you do? Is there still a need to ask? I'll take my weapon and hack them all apart. A man can be anything, but he must never be a cowardly turtle. As long as one is a man, there's only one option. At this, the middle-aged man clapped his hands and his face lit up with an excited smile. Isn't that right, actually? To reach such a point today, it was because Chu Qi Hun had no other options. But one thing that we can conclude is that Chu Qi Hun is truly a valiant man. A real man. That much is without any questions. Right. He's a real man. So, what's the other reason? The other reason, it's actually already quite clear. At Chu Qi Hun's profound level, he'd already surpassed his predecessors, and there will not be any like him in the future. A powerful man like that, how would he be afraid of even the chilly wind atop the tall mountains? AI, you guys won't be able to understand even if I talk about this kind of profound stuff with you. Come, drink. The rest also nodded. their faces filled with satisfaction. So it turns out that the truth behind the scenes is like this. Chu Qi Hun's childhood sweetheart. No matter how one calculates, she should at least be 100-something years old now, right? A wrinkled old woman can still be so enchanting? A youngster asked with confusion. Che, you've seen too little of the world and thus think like that. What an ill-informed country bumpkin. The middle-aged man's face turned ugly as he sneered in disdain. Don't you know that a woman matured in years is even more charming? Do you know that? Do you know about youth retaining techniques? Have you heard of it? Eternal youth? Do you even know what that is? There are even techniques to steal young to nourish in. Understand? How about HM? Do you understand now? Knocked silly by the barrage of words, the youth hurriedly took a step back and nodded like a baby chick pecking grains off the ground. Many thanks to Sir for the teachings. There's more profit from one conversation with an experienced man than from 10 years of reading. Today has been a huge eye-opener for me. All the clutter in my mind has been swept away. Stories like this was just a single version of the legend of Chu Qi Hun. The number of stories circulating the continent was not just limited to this one version. There were at least several hundred different accounts of the story being spread everywhere. Every single one claimed to have logic and proof and was extremely realistic and captivating. Chu Qi Hun had truly taken his place as the most famous character in the continent since ages past till now. His name was well known under the heavens, and everybody knew of his deeds. That poem had even been recorded as one of the classics to be sung for 1,000 years. Of course, at this time, the culprit behind the chaos, young Master Jun Moxie, was still completely oblivious to the storms he'd stirred up. The very person who bestowed the infamy and sins to Chu Qi Hun's name was currently pulling a beauty by the hand and traveling leisurely through the deserted snowy forest. There was no way he could know that on the outside, the great name of Supreme Chu had already reached such an exaggerated level. If he knew, this young Master Jun would definitely feel very comforted in his heart. Or perhaps he might become jealous instead. The title of the #1 assassin in the world. How come it's suddenly gone just like that? There was no telling what he would feel. After all, this fellow's brain did not run in a logical manner. There was still 200 li till the Dongfang family. This area could already be considered as the Dongfang family's territory. Finally emerging from a dense forest, Jun Moxie stood atop a tall mountain peak and looked out at the tall mountains before him. In that moment, he could not help but to sigh softly. It truly was not easy for my old grandpa to find a wife in this kind of place back then. I've walked for so many days already, but apart from the noise of birds and beasts, there isn't even any sight of a human's footprint. What do you mean by that? Mei Shuayan, who was following behind him with a sweet smile, suddenly paused her steps and looked at Jun Moxie with wide, unfriendly eyes. Ah. Heir, feck. Jun Moxie only remembered now that he'd unintentionally offended a beauty. This was a heir. Xian beast. Shut. This brother needs to add a lock to his mouth. Heir. I meant to say that apart from us, there isn't anyone else. Jun Moxie wiped the cold sweat from his brows and hurriedly executed the topic-changing grand technique. Shuayan ah. Actually, I truly adore you too much. So these few days, I've been staying up without rest to write a poem for you. Would you like to listen to it? This is a heartfelt confession of mine. Recite it and let me listen to it. Mei Shuayan's interest rose. She knew that although this fellow's reputation was one of an uncultured man, he would occasionally utter some beautiful sentences and graceful poems in unexpected moments. Seeing that he'd specially made a poem for her, her curiosity was naturally aroused. This poem is called If. Jun Moxie cleared his throat as a mysterious smile appeared on his face. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 613. Old Madam Dongfang. The name of this poem is If. Jun Moxie cleared his throat as a mysterious smile appeared on his face. After adjusting his face a little, he gathered his qi into his dantian and began in a solemn voice. Ah! If I were a stalk of wheat, you are the radiant noon sun in the sky. If I were Qingming, you are the river in the painting. If I were a bow, you are the eagle in the sky. If I were a divine sword, you are the sword-wielding heroine in the story. If. Ah. If. So many ifs. And my heart is inside it. His voice was bright and steady, ringing out through the forest. The entire mountain gorge was filled with the echoes. Wheat, sun, wheat, sun. Finished with his recitation, Jun Moxie looked expectantly at Mei Shuayan and said in a sincere voice, Shuayan, these are my heartfelt feelings. It represents my most genuine intentions, and also my desire. My love is higher than the mountains, and deeper than the seas. Please accept it. Mei Shuayan furrowed her brows and softly muttered the poem over and over again. The more she recited, the more she could not understand it. Finally, she asked humbly, This poem, what does it mean? You only need to know that this poem contains my hopes for our beautiful future. These sincere feelings of mine can only be represented by the sun in the sky. Jun Moxie said earnestly. A trace of emotion flashed across Mei Shuayan's face. But in her mind, she was still considering in her mind. The emotions in this poem were deep, but its literary standard appeared to be rather ordinary. Mei Shuayan was like this. As long as there was anything that she didn't understand, she would always try her best to think about it. But this time, she truly could not understand the poem at all, causing her to feel rather frustrated. After a long time, when she was about to continue asking Jun Moxie, a voice suddenly rang out from a far distance away. Who is creating a din here? Following this roar, a person shot over like a shooting star, landing before the two. When the person saw Jun Moxie, his eyes lit up and he laughed in a hearty manner. Moxie, you brat. You're finally here. I've been anticipating your arrival these few days. This uncle's neck has almost lengthened from waiting. This person was Dongfang Wendao, Jun Moxie's third maternal uncle. Dongfang Wendao's eyes widened slightly when he saw Mei Shuayan. This is. As he evaluated Mei Shuayan in his eyes, he could not help but to praise darkly in his heart. This brat actually found another one. And she's actually so beautiful. Your sister's daughter-in-law. My wife. Jun Moxie hurriedly introduced. Third Master Dongfang immediately grew flustered at this as he patted his pockets and sleeves clumsily. Why didn't you tell me beforehand? This uncle didn't even bring any meeting gifts. Mei Shuayan had truly suffered greatly by following Jun Moxie around. Throughout this journey, as long as it was someone he knew, Jun Moxie would introduce her as his wife, his beloved, his partner. The worst thing was, she could not say anything as these people were either people that were worthy of Jun Moxie's respect, or were people he was close to. But to her, all these people were her juniors, causing her to feel unbearably awful. As time passed, Mei Shuayan minded less and less. She had already grown used to it, And her skin had also been tempered and grown thicker. There was no helping it. If her skin was not thick enough, she would have died of embarrassment long ago while following him. What need is there for meeting gifts? Jun Moxie rejected suavely. Wouldn't it do to just prepare an extra set of gifts after you return? Shui Yan definitely won't mind. You little brat really don't regard yourself as a stranger. Don't you know that your third uncle is not rich? Dongfang Wendao's eyebrows shot up in response. Staring at his nephew fiercely, the stalwart man shook his head. Let's go. Your grandmother's eyes are growing long-sighted from longing for you. Jun Moxie nearly tripped and he rolled his eyes wildly. What? Long-sightedness? All old people get presbyopia when they age, all right? How could it be from longing for me? What kind of nonsense is this? When Dongfang Wendao said, "We're reaching soon. It's just around the corner," for the 7th time, the group finally arrived at the Dongfang family's gate. This journey had caused Jun Moxie to firmly believe that this uncle of his had a very questionable judgment of distance. From 300 li away, he kept saying, "We're reaching soon. It's just around the corner." But the number of turns they'd made from the time they started following him was over 100. The Dongfang family before Jun Moxie was so shocking that even he could not help but to open his mouth slightly. A mountain valley stretched out before him. In the valley, the surrounding area was actually filled with multiple patches of fields. In the middle was a large house with a courtyard with red walls and green tiles. The place did not exude the glamour of a large family. Instead, it looked more like a calm, ordinary village. The only thing was that this extremely ordinary-looking village had a monolithic wall with numerous families within it. A wide, spacious expanse of land could be seen in the middle. The ground was paved with densely packed stones. With the passing of so many years, the stone ground had already turned into a black auburn color, without any edges. 9 people stood before the gate, waiting. A rosewood chair was set in the middle of the courtyard, and a thin, old lady was sitting atop it. Her hair was as white as snow, and even her eyebrows were of the same white color. Although she looked well advanced in years, her spirit appeared to be exceptionally good. Her face was kindly and approachable, and only from the sharp gleam in her eyes could one see the valiant fire of one that had swept through the pugilist world in years past. Her face was wreathed in smiles upon seeing Jun Moxie, and her eyes uncontrollably grew wet as they glistened with tears. "This is your maternal grandmother," Dongfang Wendao introduced in a gruff voice. Back then, she was an expert in making herself look youthful. Even at 70, 80 years old, she could still maintain the looks of a 30, 40 years old middle-aged woman. But when your mother was sent back in such a tragic state, her hair turned white in the span of a single night, and her looks degenerated by the day until this. AI. Dongfang Wendao's tone was heavy, and Jun Moxie also felt his heart ache as he listened to him. At this time, he also remembered what Grandpa Jun Xie said about old Madame Dongfang, "That maternal grandmother of yours is not a simple character. She's an existence akin to an old fox. That old woman is clearly 70, 80 years old, but she only looks like someone in her early 30s. She looks exactly like your mother, and they look more like sisters than mother and daughter. She was a most unusual and individual beauty of her generation, and her demeanor is graceful and rich, obviously the appearance of one from a noble family." Jun Wuyi had also solemnly told him before, "Moxie, you must take extra care to be more respectful to your maternal grandmother when you see her. Although she may look very young, her mind is an entirely different from her appearance. The Dongfang old madam is the wisest woman your third uncle has ever seen in my life." But when he recalled how his grandpa and third uncle had warned him before, he felt even more heartache. A heartache born of pity. Jun Zhantian and Jun Wuyi's impression of this old woman was still stuck 10 years in the past. The Dongfang madam, his own grandmother, had actually aged to such an extent in such a short period of time ever since she brought her daughter back. Wrinkled skin and white hair. Old and unsteady. How depressed must one be mentally to deteriorate to such a state? Although her daughter had married out and borne children of her own, in the heart of the old madam, she was still the little girl with pigtails, running around happily at her heels. The shock of seeing her daughter in a state of brokenness, her spirit shattered and her heart rent, deep in a coma, living a life worse than death. The motherly heart of old Madame Dongfang could not help but to break as well. With her daughter in that state, what use was there in upkeeping vain images at this time? It was more important to first and foremost be a mother. With her heart burdened and her spirit worn, her hair turned white overnight. These 10 years, she'd been battling thousands of troubles which shackled her, and powerful external enemies which threatened her family. Now that her heart and spirit were both weary, how was it possible to not age? At her side was second master Dongfang Wenjian and eldest master Dongfang Wenqing standing on her left and right. Several youngsters stood behind her, looking over curiously. 3 women of dignified bearings stood behind her, silently watching Jun Moxie and Mei Shuiyan. As long as the old madam did not open her mouth yet, they did not dare to make a single sound. When Xian's son, Moxie, Jun Moxie, old Madame Dongfang stood up shakily and looked at the young handsome man before her. In that moment, she seemed to have seen the shadow of her daughter. It was as if her daughter was skipping towards her in a lively way as she used to do. But in that instant, she remembered that her beloved daughter was unconscious, her life and death indeterminable. Uncontrollably, her eyes grew red and tears quivered behind her eyelids. Gritting her teeth, the frail old woman took 2 steps forward, sending her white hair fluttering in the wind. Her voice was somewhat shaky as she beckoned to Jun Moxie. Come. Come closer. Let your grandmother take a good look. My dear grandson, what took you so long? Jun Moxie's steps also unknowingly grew heavy as an indescribable sour feeling surged through his chest. Forcing a smile onto his face, he walked up slowly and knelt down on one knee and lifted his head to look at this old woman who, for the sake of her family, stayed strong and firm. His heart was only filled with respect and kinship, and an indescribable sourness. Back then, when Jun Wuhui was killed, Dongfang Wenxian collapsed upon hearing the news, falling into a coma. Old Madame Dongfang had charged out with great fury, commencing a grand slaughter on the continent. The Dongfang family's assassins spread their wings, taking the entire Xian continent by force and washing it with blood. Back then, Jun Mo Yu and Jun Mo Chao's bizarre deaths were also avenged by the Dongfang family. Blood flowed for tens of thousands of li, and even the Tianxiang imperial palace was littered with heads. All of these things had been done by this frail old woman before his eyes. For the sake of her daughter, she did not hesitate to use the strength of a single Dongfang family to take on the entire world as her enemy. What kind of spirit is this? Even if I must slaughter all living creatures under the heavens, I must have my vengeance. What kind of deep-seated hatred is this? And all that was simply for the sake of her daughter, for the sake of that love. But it was also because of this reason that the Dongfang family was surrounded by an alliance of 3 supreme forces and driven into an impasse. The heroine of a generation and an unsurpassed beauty was thus forced to give up, swearing several oaths, and carrying her regrets and pain to retire from the pugilist world. Her vengeance had yet to be fulfilled. And the blood she sought had not been paid in full. Yet she was forced to return with broken weapons. From then on, she moved to a desolate mountainous village, never to return again. Day and night, she watched as her daughter suffered unspeakable pain. She was helpless to do anything about her daughter's sufferings. For a mother with such deep love for her daughter, how could she endure such torment? The collapse of the snow-covered Sword Peak and the driving out of all Xian beasts from Tianfa. For 10 years, she passed her time in this desolate place. How could the old woman's heart bear such misery? These kind of harsh conditions, how long would it take for them to be fulfilled? If the oaths could not be fulfilled, wouldn't the proud Dongfang family all grow old and die in these desolate lands? For the sake of a single daughter, the entire family clan was being pulled down. Even if she didn't have any regrets in her actions, it would still be difficult to face the rest of the family. What kind of pressure was this? The stress and worry constantly weighed on the heart of the old madam. 2 tasks. If she had not agreed to these conditions back then, the Dongfang family would have been wiped out, with no chance of ever rising up again. Left with no other choice, she'd agreed to the tasks. But in exchange, they'd only obtained the chance to drag out their feeble existence. Jun Moxie suddenly felt like could understand this grandmother of his very well. This seemingly frail old woman was shouldering a huge pressure. One that was too heavy. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 614. How uncanny. You look exactly like when she was young. Truly alike. Old Madame Dongfang placed her wrinkly hands gently on Jun Moxie's face. Her eyes grew moist, and 2 drops of tears finally fell from them. Although her vision of her grandson was now fogged up, she could not bear to take her hands off his face to wipe her eyes. With a light pull, she tugged Jun Moxie into her arms, her body shaking heavily as tears ran down her face onto her grandson's neck. My dear grandson. To not be able to see your mother for so many years. It's been tough on you. Jun Moxie opened his mouth, wanting to comfort this old grandmother of his. But for some reason, his throat seemed to have choked up, and he couldn't say anything at all. A kinship as thick and warm as this was like a spring breeze and gentle drizzle which swept through his heart, letting him know that he was actually not alone in this world. There were still so many people who were concerned about him, cared about him, and protective of him. Family. Blood family. The old madam's eyes were filled with tears, and her long, white hair floated in the wind. In this moment, she was only an old lady hugging the grandson whom she'd not seen for a long time. There were no traces of that sword heroine who swept through the pugilistic world, domineeringly slaughtering all who stood in her path. My darling grandson. Other children your age are still under the protection of their parents, carefully nurtured under their wings. But my poor, obedient grandson actually lost his father at the tender age of 7, and then his mother at the age of 8. Although your mother is still alive, it's as if you had suddenly been orphaned. Just thinking about it causes this old woman's heart to feel like it's being sliced by 1,000 knives. Mother, now that Moxie is here, it is a happy thing. You should open your heart and not dwell on the sad things. Your body should still be your priority. Dongfang Wenqing comforted. Don't bother me. Since my grandson is here, I naturally need to take a good look at him. Growing up beside that old fool Jun Xie, how could he not suffer? That wretched old thing has an explosive temper, scolding and beating whenever he feels like it. Could that kind of place provide a good environment to educate my darling baby grandson? This poor child has definitely endured many hardships these few years. If not for the Dongfang family bloodline in his body, I fear that that impenetrably thick-headed old fool would have already led him astray long ago. From the looks of it, this old madam has quite a deep dislike for old Grandpa Jun. The moment she opened her mouth, it was either old fool Jun or wretched old thing. When she was done with her scolding, she seemed much more placated. It's a huge fortune that this child has my Dongfang family's blood. Otherwise, he would have been completely lost long ago. When she received news of Jun Moxie's debauchery ways several years ago, this old madam almost exploded with rage, and very nearly charged out of the mountain to settle scores with Jun Xie. In the heart of the old grandma, her grandson was naturally the most obedient child with no faults. Even if he turned bad, it was because Jun Xie hadn't taught him well. That old thing is just a complete block of wood who only knew how to fight. How would he know how to teach a child? Jun Moxie smiled embarrassingly, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. After a long time, the old madam finally calmed down, taking a handkerchief from a gentlewoman behind her to wipe her tears. Only then did she turn her eyes to look at Mei Shuiyan. With a bright smile on her face, she asked, Moxie, is this lass my granddaughter-in-law? She looks really pretty and demure. Come, lass, turn around and let grandmother see. Jun Moxie nodded his head rapidly like a chicken pecking rice off the ground. Grandmother has formidable eyesight. This is indeed your grandson's dear wife. Grandmother, take a look and see if you're pleased with her. If you're not pleased with her, I'll go back and give her a good spanking tonight. This sentence from Jun Moxie was immediately returned with a cold stare from Mei Shuiyan. Snorting lightly, she fumed in her heart. Seeing as there are others here, I've left some face for you. Spank me? With just you? It's not even clear who will be spanking who. See if I don't take care of you tonight. Do you really think that it's so easy to take advantage of this woman? Huh. You brat. How can you say that? Wives are meant to be doted upon. How could you hit her? Besides, such a fairy-like girl. Are you really able to lay hands on her? The old grandmother smiled as her eyes measured Mei Shuiyan's body carefully. As she did so, she continuously nodded her head, and her eyes squinted together in delight. Moxie, your eyesight is not bad. This lass is not only good-looking, but her front and back are big as well, which is very good for bearing children. You must not lay hands on her. Mei Shuiyan's entire face grew red-hot, and she almost stamped her feet in embarrassment. This lady is the #1 Xian beast king in Tianfa. Even if you're the grandmother of this young thief Jun, how could you actually say that? Jun Moxie smiled and nodded happily. Grandmother is absolutely right. I have absolute confidence in giving birth to a son. There's no problem at all. At the same time, he could not help but to wonder about the state of the Dongfang family. Is their information network really so bad? They actually didn't know that Mei Shuiyan was Venerable Mei? And if you have a child, feel free to send him here. Grandmother will teach the child properly and bring him up well for you. Your grandfather is rough and uncouth. How would he know how to look after children? It'll already be a mercy if the child wasn't led astray. You are the prime example. If not for your mother's blood in you, it'd have been really be hard to say how you'll have ended up. If that old thing does anything out of line again, this old granny will go and scold him. Whenever she thought about Jun Moxie's previous debauchery reputation, she would still feel deeply concerned. Ah, send the child here? Not to mention Grandpa. Even he wouldn't be willing to do that. Jun Moxie's face twitched lightly as he looked around him. My God! This place is even more desolated than Tianfa Forest. The mountains aren't magnificent and the waters are not clear. This is your first aunt. This is your second aunt. This is your third aunt. Come and greet them. The old madam's face was wreathed in smiles as she took out a small, white jade box from her sleeves. The jade box was entirely made from the same piece of jade, and just the value of the box itself was extraordinary. Inside the box was a small phoenix standing proudly. The phoenix's body was vibrant in many colors, and its feathers looked extremely lifelike, as if the phoenix was alive and could spread its wings and fly off at any time. This grandiose rainbow phoenix is actually a complete piece from the heart of a rainbow jade crystal. This crystal was naturally formed with 7 colors, and is completely flawless. Even more amazing was that the heart of this crystal was naturally in the shape of a phoenix. Back then, a famed artisan spent 3 years before finally retrieving it. It's a rare treasure, one of a kind in this world. When it was discovered back then, this thing had caused a great commotion through the world. It was the dream accessory of countless young girls, and a sea of blood had been shed in large-scale fights over it. In the end, it was obtained by me. I've never dared to take it out, but today, I'll gift it to my granddaughter-in-law as a greeting present. It's so perfect. Kiki. The old madam smiled and personally took out the grandiose rainbow phoenix and fixed it onto Mei Shuayan's silky hair. After adjusting slightly, she nodded with satisfaction. Only a celestial beauty like my granddaughter-in-law can make this grandiose rainbow phoenix look even more gorgeous. The colorful little phoenix jade hairpin glimmered beautifully in Mei Shuayan's inky black hair, interweaving with 7 different colors in a mystical way, enhancing her beautiful face further and causing her to look like an otherworldly fairy. Mei Shuayan's face turned beet red as she stammered out a word of thanks. When she saw this grandiose rainbow phoenix the first time, she'd fallen in love with it instantly. Mei Shuayan was a beast queen of Tianfa, but she was still a girl at the end of the day. There was no way she could resist the beauty of this phoenix hairpin. Following that, it was the 3 aunts' turn to bring over their meeting gifts. In a short time, the great beauty Mei was hugging several boxes, her face red and shy. However, a hint of joy could be seen on her face. I should call him elder cousin, right? Grandma? A lively little boy ran out and beamed at his grandma. The boy was only about 10 years old, and was white and tender, appearing extremely cute. His eyes were jet black, and they glistened as he stared at Jun Moxie. Little brat, go and greet your elder cousin. The old madam smiled and pinched his chubby face as she turned to look at Jun Moxie. This is the youngest of your second uncle's family, Xiao Huai. Elder cousin. The little boy came forward and puffed out his chest. My name is Dongfang Xiao Huai, not Dongfang Xiao Huai. Actually, I don't really like this name, but on the day that I was born, my mother dreamt of a pagoda tree, so I was named after it. The name Xiao Huai was already not very nice, but everyone just likes to call me Xiao Huai now. I'm actually not naughty at all. For real. Dongfang Xiao Huai. Hello, little cousin Xiao Huai. Jun Moxie rubbed his nose and laughed. From the look on this little fellow's face, it was obvious that he was up to some mischief. As expected. Big cousin, look at how many presents you got just on today. I'm even smaller than you. And it's the first time we're meeting. Shouldn't you give me a present too? Little rascal Dongfang held his hands out excitedly. That's simple. Didn't you say that you're not satisfied with your name just now? This elder cousin shall gift you with a better name. One that's guaranteed to be cool. In the future, whoever hears it just once will definitely be shocked and unable to forget the name forever. It's the kind of name that speaks of the awesomeness of an unrivaled expert. Jun Moxie chuckled with a glint in his eyes. Ah. What name is it? I happen to want to change my name. But father and mother is against it. Elder cousin, if you can help me pick a dashing name, that'll be the best. The little fellow had completely forgotten about the matter of his present, and grew excited. N. Dongfang Xiao Huai is indeed not very domineering. The pagoda tree is also the ghost among trees too, and has a slightly inauspicious meaning. How about this? Jun Moxie smiled suavely and continued. What do you think of changing your name to Bubai Undefeated? Dongfang Bubai. Dongfang family. Forever undefeatable. What do you think? Is it domineering enough? Dongfang Bubai. Fantastic. That name is truly too awesome. The little fellow's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Taking a step back, he jumped up and did 2 somersaults, proclaiming loudly, from now onwards, I shall be named Dongfang Bubai. Not bad. However, you need to work hard to not let down this name. Undefeatable. On top of that, I've actually thought up a trademark phrase for you to go with the name as well. Jun Moxie continued in a mysterious tone. What phrase? Dongfang Xiao Huai's eyes were red with fervor. In the future, when you roam the pugilistic world, and others ask you for your name, you can say this. Jun Moxie puffed out his chest, placed one leg before the other and raised his head proudly as he proclaimed in a loud and lofty voice. Unfailing, as the sun that rises from the east. I am undefeatable. Unfailing as the sun that rises from the east. I am undefeatable. Dongfang Xiao Huai. No. Dongfang Bubai cried out as his mouth formed into a huge O shape. In that moment, his eyes were filled with adoration as he looked at Jun Moxie. Unfailing as the sun that rises from the east. I am undefeatable. This is simply too domineering. Too amazing. Wahahaha, wow. Elder cousin, you're simply too talented. I hereby declare that from now on, you are this Dongfang Xiao, no. You are this Dongfang Bubai's idol. After settling the matter of Dongfang Bubai, Jun Moxie smiled proudly with a sense of achievement. As he observed the faces around him, everyone seemed to have approved. They were obviously very satisfied with the name, Dongfang Bubai, that Jun Moxie had chosen. The mighty Dongfang family should at least have this level of domineering demeanor. Unfailing as the sun that rises from the east. I am undefeatable. For their grandson to receive such a tyrannical name, this was a very large gift for the Dongfang family. Very good. Dongfang Wenqing's eyes lit up as he praised. This phrase is truly extremely domineering. However, this brat Xiao Huai is still not fit enough to bear it. This name shall belong to our entire Dongfang family. Later on, I'll send someone to engrave these words onto a large piece of rock and erect it before the gates of our Dongfang 3 family where it shall stand forever. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 615. Tears of a Loving Mother. First uncle. That's my slogan. Elder cousin gave it to me. Why can't I use it? The little fellow was so anxious that his face had gone completely red as he jumped up and down. In that moment, his prepubescent voice piped up as he protested strongly. For a little kid like you, it's already not bad to have such a domineering name, This phrase shall naturally be left for our Dongfang family as a clan symbol. Still want to complain? If you keep complaining, you won't even get to keep the name. In the future, we'll hold a contest for all the younger generation members of the family, and only the winner will have the qualifications to be named Dongfang Bubai. Dongfang Wenqing threatened with a cold snort. In an instant, the little brat shut his mouth and went to one side, pouting lightly. All right, stop creating a din and go inside quickly. Number 3. I told you to prepare a guest room. Have you done it yet? There better be a guest room ready. Come. Let's go to the main hall first and get some tea to soothe the throat. My grandson has traveled a long distance to get here. It must be tiring. But here, you're home now. Go and take a rest first. We'll talk about the other things later. Old Madame Dongfang held Mei Shuiyan's hand tightly and shooed everyone in happily. When he reached the entrance of the main hall, Jun Moxie was shocked, and his jaws dropped slightly. Standing before the entrance was a large group of around 100 girls, all waiting patiently. Come, my obedient Moxie. I'll introduce you. The old madam was obviously a little unhappy as she pointed at the group of girls. These are all your eldest uncles' wives. This is your first uncle's second wife, his third wife, 17th wife, 59th wife. It's not a lot, right? Jun Moxie felt like he'd been struck by lightning as he stood dumbly, staring with his mouth wide open. Too awesome. Too amazing. At first, he'd only heard the numbers, and as the saying went, words are but wind, but seeing is believing. Now that he'd seen with his own eyes, he'd been deeply impacted. This first uncle of his was a little too powerful. 59 wives. The most amazing thing was that the 59th wife seems to be only 1 or 2 years older than him. It was definitely not the trick of some youth-retaining technique either. That look of innocence and tenderness could never be faked. After getting introduced to them one by one, Jun Moxie felt like his legs were growing numb, and his back was beginning to ache. Even his neck felt somewhat stiff. Although he didn't need to raise his head to look at the girls, just the action of nodding was rather effort-consuming. At this point, he could not help but to look over at Dongfang Wenqing with amazement. First uncle, Moxie truly has to hand it to you. You are really made of metal. Dongfang Wenqing's stoic face instantly turned red. Behind him, Dongfang Wenjian and Dongfang Wendao chuckled and smiled at each other in a knowing manner. Number 2. What are you laughing at? The old madam snorted angrily. Come, Moxie. Come here. These are your second uncle's wives. This is your second uncle's second wife. His third wife, his 36th wife. Jun Moxie's eyes widened and he sputtered weakly. His first uncle has 59 wives. And his second uncle has also reached number 36. Dear heavens, ah! Great earth, ah! My goodness! I thought that my fortune with the ladies was already not bad. But to think that when it's compared to my 2 uncles, it's suddenly like trying to compare a firefly to the moon, and a mustard seed to a mountain. Truly praiseworthy. Looks like I still need to continue working hard. Even if the quantity could not be compared, I must not lose in quality. These are your third uncle's wives. It's a bit less. The old madam's face turned slightly better and her expression softened. There's only 3, but they're actually the most productive of all, consecutively giving this old woman 3 grandsons and 2 granddaughters. Not like your first and second uncle. Each of them have a large harem of wives, but not one can lay a single egg. Utterly disappointing things. Jun Moxie finally understood why the old grandma was so angry. So it turns out that his first and second uncle were both completely unproductive and bad shooters. It's no wonder that the old grandma would feel frustrated. Even the girls felt extremely depressed about the situation. Whenever they looked at the little brat Dongfang Xiao Huai, their eyes would be filled with envy. His two uncles had also lowered their heads in shame. After a long time, the presents the two received had already formed into a small hill. Finally, everyone returned, and even Dongfang Xiao Huai was forcibly dragged back to his room. Only the old grandma and his three uncles were left in the room. At this point, Jun Moxie could finally lose a breath of relief. Somewhat anxious, he hurriedly asked, "Grandma, my mum's situation, how is it?" The moment this matter was brought up, everyone's expressions stiffened. Nobody spoke for a moment, and after a long time, old grandma sighed and sat down slowly, her expression one of great torment. "I have been trying to steer away from the topic all this while, to temporarily avoid talking about it. Although I knew that you would eventually ask about it. To this old woman, every moment that I can avoid dwelling on the topic is a moment gained." Jun Moxie's heart sank, and his voice broke slightly. "Could it be, Mum has already you coming here now? It's still in time to see your mother for one last time." The old grandma turned her face around as a tear fell from her wrinkled face. She forcefully adjusted her emotions and continued, "Actually, it doesn't really make much of a difference whether you see her or not. She cannot hear or see anything, even to the point of being unable to feel anything. She completely does not care about anything anymore, not her son, not her own mother. This unfilial daughter." The old grandma's voice choked up again. Dongfang Wenqing and the rest also lowered their heads sadly. "In these years, we've already tried our best, inviting countless doctors and procuring countless spirit herbs, all to wake her up. That year, the #1 doctor in the world at that time, Xin Hui Chun, also came and looked at her before. The doctor said that this was a disease of the heart. She already closed the door in her heart tightly. As long as she did not want to wake up, she would remain in a coma till her death." The old grandma shook her head, her eyes filled with tears. Her tone was extremely agitated. She hadn't even considered that by lying there like a dead person, what wouldn't happen to me, her mother. "My heart is hovering on the edge of a precipice every single day." 2 of her sons had passed away, and her only remaining son is still young. Yet, she could harden her heart and leave him behind, neglecting her filial duties toward her own mother and parents-in-law. As her mother, this daughter is the blood of my blood. How can I not think about her every single moment? Could it be that without Jun Wuhui in this world, the sky would collapse? Why can't she just be a little stronger? A little tougher for the sake of her mother? The old grandma's words were no longer coherent towards the end. Yet, she cried aloud with her hoarse and raspy voice, "For the sake of taking this vengeance, our Dongfang family battled through the heavens, commencing a grand slaughter across the continent. Our warriors poured forth, and the souls of the dead surpassed tens of thousands. As the sayings go, killing 1,000 enemies comes with a price of 800 soldiers. How many of our talented followers and disciples went forth valiantly, forever losing their lives on the battlefield? Some of their corpses were left in the wilderness. Some did not even have a body remaining. Even the 2 brothers of her deceased father perished together, taking down 6 spirit Xian experts with them. Are these not blood relations too? Are they not our family kin? All of these people, and that endless stream of blood in her heart, could it be that they still could not amount to a single Jun Wuhui?" The old madam's voice was agitated. and her tears flowed freely with her emotions. But this silly girl, this wretched girl, she actually chose this path of no return, turning the sacrifices and efforts of countless people into such a meaningless thing. The old grandma was sobbing so hard that she could hardly articulate her words. On top of that, she still chooses to torment this old bag of bones every single day. When Exen, you question the romantic love in your heart. But why do you not question the filial love in your heart? You are truly worthless. When Exen, 1. Perhaps, in mother's heart. Father is her entire sky, her everything. When father died, her sky collapsed, and her everything disappeared. Jun Moxie muttered in a hoarse voice. When one's feelings reached such a level of deepness, it's already to the point where their life and death are tied to each other. Grandma, you are a woman yourself, so you should be able to understand this feeling too. It's precisely because I understand that it's so painful for me. The old grandma gritted her teeth, tears pouring down her cheeks. What use is there of her lying there? I. Countless times, I've wanted to take a sword and stab down, ending her torment and granting her her wish. But she's my daughter. My darling daughter. I've raised her from a little girl, holding her close to my heart in fear that she would fall. She is my heart. And my liver. How could I bear to do it? How could I bear to do it? Even just the thought itself brings unbearable pain to my heart. But if I don't do this, how long must she live in her torment for? How long will she take before she dies of her own heartbreak? Everyone fell silent, not knowing what to say. Dongfang, Wenqing, and the rest lowered their heads, their eyes red and shimmering with tears. The exquisite treasure tree we've been using to sustain her life has already used up its essence energy, and is slowly wilting now. It's time she left. You've come in time to see her for one last time, and it's still possible to send her on her final journey together. This can be considered as having descendants give the final farewell. The old grandma sat down weakly, her eyes blank and lost. Her white hair floated lonelily, and her spirit seemed to have disappeared. It was as if all she was left with were her tears and cries from earlier. Mother. You should know little sister's character well. She had always been extremely stubborn and passionate. You know that better than anyone. So why are you tormenting yourself so? Dongfang Wendao wiped away the tears on his face and continued. Throughout life and death, only loving one person. Mother. Little sister's character is exactly like yours. That year, when father passed away early, didn't you also want to leave us behind and follow after him yourself? At that time, little sister was only 3 years old. We all accompanied you day and night, afraid that you might just leave. But even so, you attempted to end your own life on so many occasions. All of us were scared silly back then too. The old grandma sighed a long, forlorn sigh, as if she'd remembered something. A smile that contained a trace of warmth appeared on her aged face. That was different, it was completely different. Your father was a hero of a generation, a mighty man who upheld the heavens and earth. He's the best man in the entire world. As for that brat Jun Wuhui, how can he be compared with your father? Jun Wuhui naturally cannot be compared with father, but in little sister's heart. Brother-in-law Wuhui also meant as much for her as how father was to you. Dongfang Wenjian's tears flowed freely as he lamented. Little sister has suffered enough these few years. Although she's been sleeping constantly, it should be easy to imagine that her heart is ultimately buried in sadness. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 616. Ask the Heart. Have no regrets. Sigh. Do women from the Dongfang family really have to accept such miserable fate? Grandma Dongfang looked up to the skies as she sighed in despair. Girls should not be born to a royal family and should not be married to a hero. Those who had a hero as their husbands. How miserable their lives are, how tiring, how sad. You guys remember. The Dongfang family will not marry its girls to heroes anymore. I'd rather they live a commoner's life that allows them to enjoy their lives to the fullest. What are these shocking and grandly romantic love stories for? These sort of love matters. If we really fall into them, it would often result in the death of tens of millions. Even in the best situation, it would cause the family to sink into obscurity and misery, unable to reverse for generations. Nevertheless, which woman in this world did not want to marry a hero? Who did not wish their husband to be honored and accomplished? Having to choose between a commoner and a hero like Jun Moxie, which would a woman choose? To be honest, most women with the greatest affection and cordiality would choose to marry a hero and suffer for life than live a dull life as a commoner. How would a breathtaking beauty be willing to marry a commoner? They would rather stay single for life than act against their own will. Just as Mei Shuiyan, who would definitely choose to stay unmarried and age in the forests alone had she did not meet Jun Moxie. She would never marry a random guy. Many beautiful women in history had rough lives for this exact reason. The hall remained silent for a while. Then, Grandma Dongfang waved her hand decadently before speaking lifelessly. The three of you. Bring Moxie to his mother. I will remain here. She then quietly sat down on the chair motionlessly with her head down. Below her drooping head, a small puddle of water was evidently expanding. Those were the tears of an amiable mother. Grandma remained motionless like a statue as everyone left noiselessly. Even as they had gone a long way, Jun Moxie and Mei Shuiyan could still hear the ticking sound of tears impacting the floor. Each droplet came from the heart. Mothers cared for the emotions of their children forever. Their hearts beat and bled with the encounters of their children even if they had grown up and had family and their children. How many of us unintentionally hurt our mothers' feelings before? Bless all mothers so that they are no longer sad and will not be. Before their eyes was a small courtyard blessed with serenity. Its walls were much taller and thicker than everywhere else. Behind the walls was a deserted snowy world, but enclosed within were greeneries unaccompanied by any snow with plum blossoms flourishing in the cold. Anyone stepping inside would feel a speck of warmth. You see, for 10 years, no matter how heavy the snow, none could make their way to this courtyard. Dongfang Wenqing was not boastful, but solemn. When my little sister always lied there, refusing to wake up, Mother produced all our wealth and gathered warm jades from all over the continent regardless of the price. They were buried below. In as short as half a year, our family ran out of money. However, Mother did not give up. She knew my little sister loved greens and flowers and said she would get well sooner in this environment. Jun Moxie was shocked. He finally knew why the extreme wealth of the Dongfang family from the past had disappeared. His emotions were uncontrollably stirred up like churning waves. There was a burning sensation within his chest and his nostrils seemed to be blocked by something. He almost broke out into distressing tears. Warm jades. They were priceless treasures. Wearing a piece as big as one's thumb would guarantee a warm winter even with a thin layer of clothes. All these jades the family had bought with great prices were all simply buried here. They were all for the unconscious daughter to sleep better. although knowing that she might not be able to feel it. A small, peaceful building graced the center of the courtyard. Walking into this courtyard was like entering a painting or a dream. Two maidservants in white quietly appeared and greeted them. Dongfang Wenqing waved his hand and said, "Don't be over-courteous. They are the son of your mistress and his wife. They are here to see their mother. Do leave for now." The two maidservants were shocked as they raised their heads and looked at Jun Moxie. Their eyes glittered in surprise and tears of excitement were evidently rolling down their cheeks. They sobbed as said, The son of the mistress is finally here. Hope she will be happier." They left unwillingly after they spent a few more moments looking at Jun Moxie through their tearing eyes. "The two of them are the maidservants who always served your mother. When she returned here, they continued to serve for 10 whole years." Dongfang Wenqing said softly. Jun Moxie was dazed for a while before saying softly while looking at the leaving maidservants with gratitude, "Thank you." The two maidservants were momentarily stunned, but soon recovered and continued with their head down. They did not look back. Trailing behind them were tear marks. Dongfang Wenjian and Dongfang Wendao were careful not to make much noise with their movements and breaths as they stepped into this courtyard. Even Dongfang Wendao, who usually had coarse movements, was very careful. Jun Moxie observed his surroundings. The furnishing of the small building was elegant and exquisite. The furnishing was minimal, but nowhere appeared empty. Everywhere was tidy and the positioning was really deliberate. There was no stench and only the aroma of flowers despite the fact that within it resided a living dead. With profound feelings, Jun Moxie, accompanied by Mei Shuiyan, followed Dongfang Wenqing up the stairs quietly. Dongfang Wendao and Dongfang Wenjian were also agitated, but did not dare to go up lest they disturbed their sister. As they reached the doors of the bedroom, a great rush of warmth could be felt. Dongfang Wenqing sighed and said, "The biggest and most integral piece of jade was made into her bed." Jun Moxie was left dumbfounded. Gently pushing open the door, Dongfang Wenqing said with a low voice which was followed by a sigh, "She is right inside this room." Sigh. Jun Moxie and Mei Shuiyan were completely shocked as they peered inside the room. There was nothing except for a bed facing the sun in the southern direction. It was literally a bedroom. A woman covered by a quilt was lying on the bed silently. Her face could not be seen clearly from their position, but it could be discerned that she was sleeping comfortably. Above her chest was a small, fluorescent tree that was as green as emerald. However, there was a sign of the beginning of withering. Occupying the four walls were pictures that were arranged nicely. Upon a single glance, Jun Moxie was overwhelmed and his tears dripped down like rain. Jun Wu Hui. All of them were drawings of his father. Drawings of him clad in army uniform, wearing civilian clothes, in white with a sword, in battle, on horseback, smiling, frowning, being angry, in love. From young to old. Each of them looked like the real deal as they were drawn with many details. Each of them was drawn with utmost effort as if they were countless Jun Wu Hues. They were standing, sitting, loitering and accompanying his greatest love. From these drawings, one could witness, feel or even experience the whole of Jun Wu Hui's heroic life. Even his disposition was evident, nothing was left out. Every pair of eyes on these drawings were staring at the small bed and the person on it. It was as if their urge to look at her could never be fulfilled. It was as if these gazes pierced through the underworld and would never shift. When she was just back home 10 years ago, she was still able to move. She persevered for 3 days and nights in her efforts to construct these drawings bit by bit. Nobody could stop her calm madness. Every time she completed one piece, she would look at it for a while and alternated between laughing and crying before hanging it at a certain spot and continued drawing more. We thought once she had drew enough, she would stop. However, when she finished the last piece, she appeared exhausted and only stared at the blank, ignoring everyone else. It was as if Jun Moxie was standing there. Dongfang Wenqing sobbed and continued. That night, she suddenly spoke and everyone was really excited. But after speaking those verses, she shut her eyes and for 10 years. 10 whole years she remained asleep. Jun Moxie looked up to the wall above his mother's head through his tearing eyes. Hanging there was a poem, making that segment of wall the only one free from the drawings. No regrets for life, nor for all after life. If you have no regrets, then neither do I. How do I feel? Remorseless forever. Heavens or the earth. Life or death. No regrets. Dongfang Xie, Jun Moxie's wife and Jun Moxie's mother, was lying there silently, with a sense of gentleness on her face. There even seemed to be a sign of a smile. It must be that in her dreams, Jun Moxie was still there looking at her, accompanying, listening, and respecting. In her dreams, they will live happily ever after. She felt remorseless forever. Although he was gone in reality forever, he would always be in the dreams. That was why she was still happy and satisfied despite being asleep all year round. That was why she refused to wake up, because she would lose him if she did. Losing him once was enough. She did not want to feel the pain of losing him again after experiencing the satisfaction of getting him back. That was why she did not want to wake up. No matter why. The path to her consciousness was tightly shut. Jun Moxie suddenly felt he had never in this life experienced such helplessness like today. He staggered and slowly crashed down onto the floor and his tears were rolling out like fountains. He held his head with both hands and felt chaotic. This affection and love that shocked the world occupied his mind. What is love? It was perfectly illustrated by the silently lying Dongfang Xie at this moment. Love is unchanging. Love is not parting until death. Love is not abandoning despite separated by life and death. Love is having no regrets. Fall in love. And that is it. There is nothing in this world that can replace it. Nothing can replace one's partner. And it is forever. Perhaps, in dreams, this love story would continue forever. It would be a perfect world with love deeply attaching couples forever. Women only devote her most authentic affection to one person. Especially for these extremely beautiful women. They were so devoted until it was frightening. But this was true affection and real, forever. Although this might appear to be selfish and cruel to her family, Dongfang Xie could not resist anymore. It was not that she did not care for her mother, son, and relatives anymore. But it was that her heart was empty and dead. It could not allow anything to occupy it anymore. She could no longer think. Dongfang Wenqing slowly stepped out of the room with tears hanging in his eyes. Mei Shuayan was tearing uncontrollably but silently and took Jun Moxie's shoulder as support. Who would not be touched by such authentic love? Especially when Dongfang Xie and Jun Moxie both had very sophisticated feelings. Mei Shuayan suddenly felt that if it was Jun Moxie on those drawings, then lying on that bed right now would definitely be herself. This sort of heartbreaking feeling made her unable to maintain her gracefulness. Jun Moxie and Dongfang Xie, a hero and a beauty of the generation. The presence of Jun Moxie and Mei Shuayan did not affect slightly the atmosphere in the room. Dongfang Wen Xian was still smiling slightly, showing her satisfaction, and lying there silently. Jun Wuhui on the drawings were still casting their deeply affectionate, determined and everlasting gaze on Dongfang Wen Xian. The gazes were nuanced for each drawing. Some showed worry for his wife. Some showed his doting of his wife's naughty character. Some anger for his wife's disobedience. Some his gentleness upon seeing his wife's comfortable sleep. Although the flesh of Jun Wuhui was not present, his feelings were creating a furnace in this room. Dongfang Wen Xian's body was still here, but she had an empty heart and her consciousness had drifted out to enjoy her long-lasting life with her husband in thin air and nothingness. Jun Moxie was petrified. As he felt the unwavering love of his parents, he had to face a dilemma. With the immense spiritual aura of the exquisite Hongjun Pagoda, Jun Moxie was sure he could wake his mother up. But what good would that do? Jun Wuhui was no longer alive. How could his mother bear living a lone life? On the other hand, would it be better for his mother to stay in her dreams, to stay by his father forever? Furthermore, her 3 sons were still alive before she lost herself in the dreams. What would happen if she was told that 2 of them had died if she woke up? How would she feel to have lost her husband and 2 sons? Would that not be worse? I was an orphan in my past life. For this life, although my father had passed away, I still have a mother. She was only deep asleep and not dead. Jun Moxie always desired and dreamed of experiencing being hugged by his mother. Would it be warm, sweet, or full of the sense of security? Everyone talks about and praises mother's hugs. But I am facing such a dilemma when I really faced her. Is this fate to be lacking of parents' love? I practiced the art of unlocking heaven's fortune and transcended the 3 realms, avoiding reincarnation forever and escaping death. But, for kinship, I just happen to lack love from parents. Does this mean I will never be able to experience it? Mother. Mother. I have looked forward to and desired this moment for 2 lives. I have dreamed about this for 2 lives as I experienced both of them. It popped up more than 1,000 times in my dreams. But I still can't have you with me. Jun Moxie staggered up and approached the bed. He then slowly knelt down and gently laid his head on his mother's right palm. The sadness within was immediately overwhelming. What should I do? Who will tell me? Jun Moxie never experienced such uncertainty, uselessness, and helplessness. As he felt the warmth from his mother's hand, Jun Moxie's body twitched while he wept and could not produce another word. His heart also felt as if it was beating with agony and his tears veiled his sight. He could only ask in his mind, "Mother, what should I do? What do you want me to do? Mother." As he called out for his mother, Jun Moxie felt as if the pressure on him was making him explode. His long-held wish and desire, all blended into nothingness at this moment. I am not satisfied. I really don't feel this is correct. I need to fix this. Jun Moxie raised his head and let out a silent bellow. His unstopping tear rolled into his mouth. It was full of bitterness. That could be felt all the way through the heart, and it would continue forever. I feel so bitter. So bitter. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 617. The Power of Wood. For my mother. What should I do? Seeing the satisfied and calm look on his mother's face, Jun Moxie was feeling disconcerted. There's a 1 inch my name. I never denied that I was wicked. I was never a good guy. I was always self-centered. I always do what I want to without hesitation. But then, it's my mother before me. Can I really be so cruel as to drag her out of her sweet dreams simply because I have the selfish desire to reunite with her? How is she going to face the fact that she will be living without her husband and 2 sons? Will she be able to take it? Furthermore, if she sees how her family has fallen into such a pathetic situation, how could she live peacefully? Also, would she feel guilty and ashamed of herself when she realized that her mother suffered for 10 years and aged overnight because of her? Without the urge to live, how can she be revived? How can I let a woman who has given up lead a painful life that is as good as dead? Can I really be so selfish? Jun Moxie silently questioned himself. The usually decisive Jun Moxie was now facing a dilemma. How could he call himself a son if he did not save her while he could? His conscience did not allow that. And it was obviously not right by anyone's standard. How heartless would he be if he did it? What's wrong with you? As Mei Shuayan was also sobbing at the scene before her, her sharp senses told her that there was something wrong with Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie shook his head in great dismay. He reached out his shaking hand and held the small, withering tree on his mother. He was shocked the moment he made contact. As the fluorescent light touched his skin, he could clearly feel that he was being re-energized. What a wonderful treasure! With such magical object, it was not surprising that Dongfang Wen Xian could have her life extended for 10 years. As Mei Shuayan was still puzzled, Jun Moxie closed his eyes and forced out the power of wood from his body with full strength. At this moment, his great sorrow mingled together with the power of the exquisite Hongjun pagoda and transformed all the spiritual aura into the power of wood. For, my mother, maybe you really do not want to wake up so that you can fulfill your wish to stay together with father for life. But even if it is a dream, I hope I can enter it and make your sweet dream better. The power of wood. Jun Moxie had been practicing this skill ever since he had acquired it. It was just he had never used it yet. But, what exactly was the power of wood? The power of wood represented the purest essence of plants. With enough of it, one could germinate any sort of strange and magical seeds. With enough of it, one could let a tree instantly grow to the day of its demise or revive a plant that was about to wither. It snatched the creation of the world, gathered the quintessence of the heavens, and transformed spiritual aura of the 5 elements. The power of wood. Too amazing. Exposing his true powers. Revealing his trump card. Right now, Jun Moxie did not worry about any of that. He concentrated fully on creating a comfortable environment for his mother. Mei Shuayan's confusion became shock and finally amazement. What sort of stupefying change did she witness to make the usually calm Mei Shuayan so shocked? It was all merely because everything that was happening was too unbelievable. The small, withering magical tree was regaining robustness at an observable speed in Jun Moxie's palms. The fluorescence intensified and the plant glowed more green. The withering leaves and branches slowly changed to light green and then deep green, which finally developed to the extent that it was almost transparent. The whole room had become lively due to the rejuvenation of the small tree and the accompanying green flashes. That was not it. A small bud emerged on the top of the tree suddenly and developed into the small petal of emerald green leaf, and this continued on and on. Mei Shuayan felt that her collapsing legs could not support herself anymore. She could only slowly sit down with dropping jaws, utter shock, and an inability to make any more sound. Even she had never heard of this sort of power. It was above being a myth. Slowly, The small tree that was only of palm size grew from 5 petals to 15 as it regained its green hue. Its size also grew at a very fast rate to the size of one's head, widening to 3 times of its original. If the previous tree could support Dongfang Wen Xie for 10 years, then this one could for 100. Jun Moxie closed his eyes. Tears continued to ooze from the corners of the eyes. And the body's spiritual power was also delivered unreservedly. There was an upper limit to the power of a man as there was an upper limit to the power of plants. Even if the small tree was magical, it had its limits in loading the essence of heaven and earth. Under the constant perfusion from Jun Moxie, the vitality of the small tree was finally full. Jun Moxie did not dare continue anymore. He was worried that it would be too much for the magical tree to take. He finally stopped. But his eyes remained closed and his expression was one full of devotion. Holding Mother's slender hands and gently rubbing them against his face, he felt a tender and delicate touch. His tear continued to roll down, wetting his mother's palm. This is what I want and dream. He did not hesitate to start the work of heaven-making again. He slowly instilled his mother's meridians with the most pure spiritual power in his body, carefully combing any impurities in each meridian of his mother. I'm sorry. Although you wish to sleep, or would rather die to meet my father, but, as a son, I can't let you go, even if you sleep all your life ignoring me and refuse to say a word. I am your child after all. There was a great haziness surrounding the heart of Dongfang Wen Xie, which was as dense as fog and almost solid. Jun Moxie knew very well that as long as he could clear this fog, his mother would wake up immediately. But Jun Moxie set this matter aside for a while before he making his final decision. If she really woke up and immediately decided to commit suicide, then all his efforts would be in vain. So, Jun Moxie could only for now adjust his mother's meridians and everything else to the best possible state. As for the heart, he did not dare to touch it. After quite a while, Jun Moxie opened his eyes and looked ahead in perplexity. In that position, a portrait of his father was smiling comfortingly at him. Jun Moxie took a long breath and said to himself in a low voice, "What am I supposed to do? Am I sure? Shui Yan. I can wake my mother up and restore her body to its best state. But her heart, I can't do it. Shui Yan. You tell me, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do?" As he talked, Jun Moxie was still staring blankly at the warm gaze of his father in the drawing in front of him, as if asking his elusive father for advice. Mei Shui Yan was momentarily speechless. After a long pause, she finally shook her head slowly and said, "I don't know, to be fair. It's a dead knot, standing in the position of a woman, if it's you in the drawing and I'm lying on that bed. I don't want to wake up. I'd rather sleep forever. I would simply want to be accompanied by you in my dreams. Although the world outside is reality, but you would not be present." She smiled sadly and said, Mother had drawn so many portraits of father before she fell asleep to accompany her. This showed that she was obviously determined to sleep forever. She had made up such a perfect world for only father and herself. It would be cruel to force her out. So, she had absolutely sufficient reasons to continue sleeping. After all, that's what she sought for. Maybe we really shouldn't disturb her. If our mother can get what she wants and be happy, isn't it better than anything? Jun Moxie sighed in dismay and said, "I also think so, but if you have the ability to wake her up, but didn't, I'm afraid that's not very right either." Mei Shui Yan said soberly, "Firstly, with her lying down here like this, 2 big families will continue to suffer. The Dongfang family had already sacrificed so much for mother. And the grandma is suffering day and night, and feeling better dead than alive. There is also the Jun family, trying to avenge father and their sons. On the other hand, it's you. Can you really leave everything as it is? It is also problematic ethically. If you can, wake her up. Suddenly, a depressing voice sounded outside the door. They looked up in surprise and saw Grandma Dongfang standing at the door with tears on her face and trembling. This pathetic mother followed them here after all. The old lady trembled, poked the floor with her crutches heavily. With a loud bang, she repeated, "Wake her up." The remark showed extreme urgency and certainty. Then she came in, tears in her eyes, but also full of great surprise, and fixed her gaze on Jun Moxie. She said word by word, "Moxie, if you have the ability to wake her up, why are you still hesitating? Let her wake up immediately. Immediately. Immediately." Jun Moxie said, still upset, "I also do, Grandma, but what will happen when she wakes up? How is she going to face the brutal world? Even if she can't face it, she still has to. There are always many things in life that you do not want to face, but have to." Although the old lady's eyes were glittering with tears, but she was fierce. Her fervent gaze appeared to be able to melt one's soul. She said heavily, "Moxie, your mother. Have you wondered what kind of identity she has?" Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 618. As a daughter, a wife and a mother, you must wake up. What identities she has? Jun Moxie shook his head, looking puzzled. My mother had an identity that I did not know of. When she came to this world, she is firstly a daughter. My daughter. Grandma Dongfang stared at Jun Moxie without blinking as more tears rolled down and her white hair danced with the wind. Secondly, she is the younger sister of her 3 brothers. Then she is Jun Wuhui's wife. Next she is your family's daughter-in-law and finally, your mother. First as a daughter, then a wife and finally a mother, or a grandmother. Grandma Dongfang looked up at the sky and sighed depressingly. She only fulfilled her duty as a wife by sleeping here all the time. What about her mother who is in so much agony day and night? Is she not responsible as well? From a young age, her son had a mother who was as good as none. Isn't this her responsibility as well? She still has so many duties in life. How can she remain asleep? The old lady was shouting fiercely when she reached the last sentence. Jun Moxie and Mei Shuayan were really shocked. They suddenly understood. Jun Moxie had worried that his selfish act would hurt his mother, but did not realize that it would be more so if he did not. So many people would be let down. She must wake up. Wake her up, as she must, the old lady said with a low voice. She should not have slept like this 10 years ago. It would even be better if she killed herself then and would not have haunted me and the whole family for so many years. Our relentless effort was all for this day, for her to wake up. If she dares to kill herself, how can she even do that in front of her son, her daughter-in-law, and her heartbroken mother? If she really does so, I will not stop her. Even if she was to die before me. It would be better than now. Till this point, 2 streams of tears finally gushed out uncontrollably. Grandma Dongfang continued while crying. As a woman, I have experienced many things till now, and even situations similar. I understand her. I can empathize with her. But, she have to endure her own suffering. She cannot escape forever. Grief is an integral part of life. As she continued on, her body suddenly trembled vigorously. Although she sounded very cold, her great excitement and anticipation for her daughter to wake up had become evident. She slowly approached the bed and gently touched her daughter's exquisite face. Her words were stern, but her actions were gentle, lest interrupting her daughter's sweet dreams. Her gestures and gaze were both so warm and gentle. She carefully removed her daughter's hair from her face and leaned down to touch it with her cheeks. She said softly, "There isn't a single ordeal that cannot be overcome. When Xen, I, your mother, will accompany you no matter what. We will manage everything together, you won't be lonely." "All right, Grandma, since you insist, I will prepare to wake her up." Jun Moxie now appeared determined. He was always like this. As long as he had made a decision, he would not regret it. Earlier, he had not made up his mind yet, so he was hesitant. But now, he only needed to consider what happened next. After you wake up. Grandma Dongfang looked at her daughter's face and could not resist covering her face to cry. What awaits will be endless suffering, or even more tragedy. No more husband, and 2 more sons. Oh, my daughter. My Wen Xen. Why is your life so tragic? Every time I think of this, I just feel unbearable pain in my heart. Every time, I would rather you don't wake up. I have a way to let mother recover as fast as possible. Mei Shuayan said carefully. What is it? Both Jun Moxie and Grandma Dongfang were in ecstasy and asked simultaneously. If Moxie used up all his strength to save mother and then lost his consciousness so that he is almost dead, if so, how will mother react? Mei Shuayan said slowly. Almost death? Loss of consciousness? Both of them were shocked, but continued to think about it as if they got where she was coming from. Suddenly, Grandma Dongfang clapped her thighs and praised out loud. What a nice plan. In this case, when Xen would devote her time in taking care of her son, and naturally she would leave everything else aside first. She will only have the mood to understand other things once her son is getting better. And by then, all the facts will seem less devastating to her. What a nice plan focused on human psychology. Moxie, your wife isn't bad. The old was after all more experienced. Grandma Dongfang figured out what Mei Shuayan meant before Jun Moxie did. With his intelligence, Jun Moxie immediately understood as well. He nodded profusely and agreed. Indeed, a marvelous plan. Although it is deceptive, but it is actually the best way out for now. Shuayan, my wonderful wife. I will reward you tonight for coming up with such a nice plan. Mei Shuayan immediately flushed and complained. Speak properly. Don't be, anyways. I intend for you to be really hurt. If you try to pretend and mother discovers, then the situation might get worse. It will only be effective if you are really hurt. A real injury? This is. The old lady was hesitant. Being able to deceive someone who takes care of him every day for a long time is very difficult. Furthermore, even if mother is not an expert, she is still a Xian Qi practitioner. So, if you try to pretend to be hurt, it might not work. Mei Shuayan smiled confidently, but being the almighty Moxie, I am sure he will be fine with strange injuries such as impacted inner organs or power failure, as long as he controls himself daily. Grandma Dongfang could not understand what Mei Shuayan had said, partly because of her unexceptional cultivation and partly due to a lack of understanding of what her grandson was capable of. But Jun Moxie beside her clearly understood. Getting himself injured? That was too easy for him. As long as his soul was not shredded into pieces. What kind of injury could bother him with all the spiritual aura gathered from the heavens and the earth? The control she was referring to was actually for him to hold on to his recovery powers from healing him too quickly. That's a bit too risky, isn't it? Impacted internal organs and power failure? This is. The old lady sucked in some cold air. This is not child's play. If something went wrong, then I would have lost both my daughter and grandson. No. No. This is too risky. Let's try something else. Don't worry, Grandma. Xie will be fine. Your grandson is really capable. Mei Shuayan put on a lovely smile. Really? Upon seeing Mei Shuayan's confidence, Grandma Dongfang looked at Jun Xie with much less doubt. She put on a more serious face and scrutinized his grandson, but completely failed to notice what level he was on. Xie, tell me honestly, what's the level of your Xian cultivation? If you are above the sky Xian cultivation, it is still possible, but aren't you too young to be? Asked Grandma Dongfang. Jun Xie exchanged a smile with Mei Shuayan and replied, Grandma, you are in the supreme realm now, I suppose? The 7th level of the spirit Xian? The 3rd tier of supreme? Jun Xie's question contained much confidence. You can tell my cultivation. The old lady was really surprised. She could not tell his cultivation, but he could hers. Does this mean that Jun Xie had a higher cultivation than her? Yes. My Xian cultivation would be at the 8th level of the spirit Xian and the 4th tier of supreme. Jun Xie thought for a short while and decided to tell her the truth. If I could improve a bit more, it would be the superior supreme level. Tisk. Grandma Dongfang sucked in more cold air. She stared at her wonderful grandson, and then shook twice before crashing down on the chair. Mei Shuayan was fast to react. She quickly supported the old lady. The 8th level of Spirit Xian. The 4th tier of Supreme. The old lady felt that she was either dreaming or that her grandson was exaggerating. She shook her head profusely in great disbelief. How is this possible? Nothing is impossible, Grandma. Don't worry. Xie indeed has this cultivation. If he were really to fight, ordinary superior supremes would not be able to keep him company. Mei Shuayan was extremely confident. What Mei Shuayan had said now was clearly quite untrue. With the skills Jun Xie had now, it would not be unable to keep him company, but would be killed immediately. Those 15 experts from the Supreme Golden City getting assassinated in the snowy meadow, with 5 solid superior supremes, was a good illustration. Even the supreme assassin Chu Qi Hun could not achieve this, even though everyone else thought he had. After all, the top assassin, the venerable assassin of this world, was undoubtedly Jun Xie. Oh! Grandma Dongfang stood up trembling, with the support of the bed. She looked at Mei Shuayan and said, Young lady, I am very confident in my discerning skills, but I really could not tell the true power of you and Xie. If Xie is already a supreme, then what about you? With her many years of experience, the old lady had already noticed that her granddaughter-in-law was also exceptional. Since she had already started to question, she decided to go all the way. I am actually slightly stronger than him. Mei Shuayan took a long while to choose the suitable words and said with a humble mumble. Oh my goodness. The old lady's eyes rolled back and fainted. Her body weakened and collapsed. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 619. Getting injured? It's worth it. This is a dream. It must be. I must have started dreaming from when they said when Xian can be saved. If it's not a dream, how is it even possible? Someone who has been unconscious for 10 years can be awakened. Two young adults still in their teen years reaching the 4th level of Supreme and Superior Supreme respectively. 9th level of Spirit Xian. Clearly it is already Superior Supreme. That kind of person doesn't even exist in myths. The old madam was happy beyond words. She broke down, but was yet so happy. With such sweet dreams, nothing else really mattered. The remote courtyard fell into an unprecedented silence. Outside the courtyard, men of the Dongfang family closely monitored any movement. The 3 brothers of the Dongfang family patrolled back and forth with their sword hilt, as if facing a great enemy. The old lady sat in the middle of the bedroom without blinking. Mei Shuiyan, clad in white robe, stood on the top of the small building, looking around with her sword ready. It was an absolutely foolproof precaution. Even if the 3 Holy Lands were to send all their men, Mei Shuiyan could single-handedly hold them off for a while. What's more, they were situated in such secluded location in the first place. In the bedroom, Jun Moxie closed his eyes and grabbed his mother's hand, sending a vast amount of pure spiritual aura into her, driving away the haze in her heart. Jun Moxie did not dare to be too hasty. Not a single bit. He dissolved the haze bit by bit. After all, his mother had not moved for 10 years. Even though her body had been conditioned by herself, she was still weak to a large extent. If he used too much power, he might cause incalculable harm. They had to be exceptionally careful. Jun Moxie was 100% vigilant. No mistakes could be made. The haze at the heart of Dongfang when Xian slowly disappeared. Under the pressure of the infinitely powerful spiritual aura of Jun Moxie, it disappeared directly, leaving no trace. Slowly, only the last small bit was left. If it was originally the size of an apple, then now it was only that of a strawberry. The calm expression on Dongfang when Xian disappeared, replaced with a deep frown. She seemed to be aware that she was about to be pulled out from her sweet dreams. So she was very unwilling. She still wanted to stay. But the pulling force was immense. So strong that she could not resist. She struggled as hard as she could. The expression on her face became more and more painful, and her head was swaying violently. Grandma Dongfang gently held her daughter's hand. Her face was full of pity, surprise, and concern. At this moment, it was too late to stop. But the old lady was suddenly worried. She sort of regretted. If when Xian wakes up and discovers that her husband and 2 sons are dead, how will she react? What is the most important thing in a woman's life? Her family, her husband, and her kids. 10 years of sweet dreams. All the happiness would disappear instantly. When she woke up, she not only had to face the tragedy of her husband passing away, but also the fact that 2 of her 3 sons had died. How cruel it would be! How miserable! The old lady could hardly imagine what her daughter would look like and how she would react when she woke up. She simply held her daughter's hand tightly and looked at her daughter with pain, struggle, and anxiety. She seemed to have to pass all her strength on to her daughter to help her withstand the endless pain. It was almost done. Even Mei Shuiyan, who was on the rooftop, could clearly detect the pain, the contradiction, and the excitement of Jun Moxie. This was the critical moment. Finally, Dongfang when Xian had a big frown. painfully shaking her head with a facial expression that was full of the great dismay concerning life and death. Sweat beads as big as soybeans covered her forehead. They slowly rolled down. And suddenly, her eyes blinked, and then she cried out sadly, "Wu Hui!" Then she suddenly sat up. At the same time, the huge spiritual energy in the meridians of Jun Moxie immediately reversed, bombing his dantian. A mouthful of scarlet blood sprayed out continuously from his mouth. Nevertheless, he continued delivering his spiritual energy. This injury was nothing like the fake they had planned. It was the real deal. And it was a particularly big deal. To make everything as authentic as possible, Jun Moxie decided to really use up all his power. With the explosion within him, his inner organs were badly damaged. He was very close to death. From a secular point of view, as Dongfang Wen Xian woke up, it would be over for Jun Moxie. It would be likely that he would not be getting off a bed for life. This was no exaggeration. But he had to give his all because he cared for his mother so much. And it would be worse if something bad happened to his mother. For my mother, I will do anything. For her, the injury is worth it. No matter how severe. Dongfang Wen Xian only felt that she woke up from a distant dream. She opened her eyes blankly with a still painful expression. She felt that there was still a warm current in her hands. Upon opening her eyes, she saw an old face full of wrinkles, looking at herself with tears. It was a familiar voice, trembling with a cry. Wen Xian, my daughter. My dear daughter, you finally woke up. With her eyes wide open, the Dongfang Wen Xian looked at the face unbelievably. Being the daughter, she recognized that the old lady in front of her was her mother, who had been such a splendid woman. She immediately panicked and cried out, "Mother? How did you become like this? There's nothing wrong with me. Leave me alone. Look after your son first." Alas! Poor boy. The old lady burst into tears, and her tears continued to fall. Son. Dongfang Wen Xian looked up, only to see a young, handsome, and familiar face reflected, lying on the quilt covered with her own body. His eyes were closed, and he was pale, like the dead, with blood constantly gushing out from his mouth. He had obviously dropped unconscious. But his smile still suggested a trace of joy. It was his face. This person in front of me is indeed my son. One of his hands is clutching mine. This stream of warmth, it is flowing from this hand. My son woke me up. But, what has happened to him? Why is he like this? Suddenly, Dongfang Wen Xian felt great grief and sorrow. She felt as if her heart and lungs were tearing apart from all her sadness as she eyed her son's pale face and the bloodstain by his mouth. This is Mou? She looked at her son in front of her in bewilderment. Before she fell unconscious, Mou, her eldest son, had been about this age, but perhaps still a bit older than this person before her. Or is it Mo Cho? She reached out her trembling hand and rolled up Jun Moxie's right sleeve. After looking at it, she shook her head and said, "Not Mo Cho, nor Mou." Suddenly, she cried out with great sadness, "Is it Moxie?" She stretched out her hand hurriedly and pushed aside the hair of her son. There were 3 red nevi above his ear. The red nevi in this position was not even known to Jun Moxie himself. It was very small, like 3 sesames aligned in a line. This was also a sign that only a mother could find. It's Moxie. My Moxie. Dongfang Wen Xian began to panic. Instantly she felt a twitching heartache. Mother. What happened to Moxie? Why is he vomiting so much blood? You are skilled. Save him. What's wrong? Aren't you to blame for that? The old lady wiped her tears. You have been sleeping for 10 years. The Dongfang and Jun families have exhausted countless efforts and human resources, and was still unable to wake you up. Moxie, in order to wake you up, has practiced a magical technique since childhood. Now, as he has finally made breakthroughs, he can't wait to save you. But in order to save you, this silly child has exhausted all his strength, triggering the power to recoil back on him. So he is vomiting blood, and life is at stake. You. Wen Xie. Look at your son. You. How can you bear to do this? You. Alas. With a long sigh, the old lady lifted Jun Moxie and let him lean in her arms. She wiped blood stains from his mouth with a soft silk scarf. But in this way, the pale face with great mental distress was completely revealed to Dongfang Wen Xie. I've been sleeping for 10 years? Dongfang Wen Xie questioned, confused herself, but immediately left the matter behind. She was concerned as she even forgot her own pain, and hastily urged, Mother. Is Moxie going to be okay? Do something about it. This silly boy. Why is he so desperate? Why so desperate? You still dare to ask. It was all for you, his mother. Is it not because he wanted to have a mother to love him? Poor child. He has nothing left except for you. But you are still lying there ignoring him. How painful and concerned would the child be? Have you ever thought about it? The old lady continued to lament. You only cared about your tragedy, and refused to wake up from your dreams. But what about this kid? Moxie. He is still lucky. He has grown to this age without any illness or disaster. But he must be missing you. Dongfang Wen Xie was really distressed. She threw the quilt aside to get out of bed. Let me look at Moxie. My poor child. She held Jun Moxie tightly in her arms, and suddenly burst into tears. I've been sleeping for 10 years. Wu Hui has already passed away for 10 years. 10 years. What a long time. I don't know how my 3 children grew up without their mother's care. How are they doing? The loving nature of a mother filled her heart for a moment, and even the indispensable image of her husband was thrown aside for a while. Dongfang Wenxin did not feel anything strange, but the old lady opened her eyes in disbelief. She could immediately come down and walk normally. Exactly how powerful was Moxie's technique? How badly is he really hurt? By now, the old lady was really becoming worried. Originally I thought it was just a minor injury, but now it looks quite serious. Dongfang Wenqing quietly came in, and deeply sighed. For these years, younger sister, you. He could not finish his sentence and began sobbing uncontrollably again. All you know is to care for your son. But you know what? Your own mother. I aged overnight for your sake. The old lady sighed sadly. Mother. It's all my fault. I was not filial. I'm sorry. Moxie. My Moxie. I am a bigger disappointment to you. Dongfang Wen Xie tightly embraced Jun Moxie, bursting into loud a cry. Don't cry anymore. Save the child first. The old lady breathed a sigh of relief and warned loudly. This stage had finally passed. As for the future, that would be a future matter. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 620. I finally have a mother who cares for me. With a flash of white, Mei Shuayan quietly appeared in the room. Seeing that Dongfang Wen Xian had woken up, she was naturally happy. But seeing the fainted Jun Moxie with mouth full of blood, she was heartbroken. With her high level of cultivation, the severity of the injury was apparent at a glance. She lamented in her mind. The serious injury should have been a fake. Why were you so desperate? He was obviously dying. Nevertheless, she was fully aware of how important Dongfang Wen Xian was to Jun Moxie. Perhaps, Jun Moxie's desire for mother's love at that moment was beyond Mei Shuayan's comprehension. Mother. What a sacred word. As for Jun Moxie, the lack of mother had haunted him for both lives. My mother from my past life. Why did she abandon me? Why? Do you know how much I needed you? Even when you hit me and scold me, I still needed you. I lived a heroic past life. No one was not afraid of me. I was the myth and the miracle. But, who truly knew my agony? Until death. I did not know my real family name. I was like an extra in that world. Despite of my greatness, I had no root. I wanted a mother. I desired her love. Who knew how desperate I was for it? Every time I woke up in the wee hours of the night, every day the autumn wind blew, I thought of her. Every time I could not sleep, every time it was the union day for everyone else, I was thinking of her. I could only walk my path alone. Did I really want to be cold-blooded and heartless? I also wanted to be hugged by my mother when I cried as I was treated with injustice. I was not in need of the care, but was craving for the love. In this life, my mother is still alive. But she is so far away from me, and is in an endless dreamland. When I recognized my own identity as Jun Moxie, my mother was still asking her heart. But I am your son. And you are my mother. Jun Moxie really fainted. The moment Dongfang Wen Xian woke up, he finally allowed himself to faint. To faint in happiness. The sudden appearance of an extremely beautiful girl in white who was so concerned with Jun Moxie made Dongfang Wen Xian ask, "Who is this young lady?" "Young lady? She is your daughter-in-law. She is Moxie's wife," the old madam said, half scolding. "Wen Xian, you are already a mother-in-law. Maybe soon you will have a grandson." "Daughter-in-law? Moxie's wife?" Dongfang Wen Xian was surprised. She scrutinized Mei Shuayan and finally smiled in satisfaction. "What's your name?" Mei Shuayan immediately flushed like a red plum blossom. She replied softly, "Mei Shuayan. Moxie's wife, why don't you call me mother?" The more Dongfang Wen Xian looked at Mei Shuayan, the more satisfied she was. My son really has a good taste. This girl is even prettier than me when I was young. Mother. Mei Shuayan greeted, with awkwardness and shy happiness. Good daughter, you are so beautiful. You have been more generous to him, because he was always naughty from a young age. Dongfang Wen Xian smiled comfortably. She tightened her grip on Jun Moxie's arm and exclaimed with tears rolling in her eyes, "Yeah. I have become a mother-in-law. I will soon have a grandson. If Wu Hui knew about it, wouldn't he be so happy? I should have told him earlier." The old madam sighed in sadness. I will soon have a grandson." Dongfang Wen Xian frowned suddenly, but it soon broke into a smile. Mo Xie is the youngest. If he already has a wife, then Mo Yu and Mo Cho would have gotten one long ago. Shouldn't they already have a lot of kids? Sigh, now I really seem to be an irresponsible mother. Where are the two of them? They didn't come. Don't hurry. The old madam faked a smile. We are at the Dongfang family. It already took Mo Xie much effort to reach here. I am sure you know that we are living at a very secluded place. Oh. Dongfang Wen Xian slowly sat down. Although she still felt ominous, she did accept it. She smiled and said, "Ah, I have forgotten. We are 17,000 of miles away from Tianxiang City. That's really far. Back then, I also went for a few thousands of miles before I met a single person. And that person was Wu Hui. He was carrying one of his soldiers with a few other Mei to find a doctor. The soldier had been bitten by a snake. They were lucky that they met me that day." She continued faintly. Later did I know that the soldier was one of his close guards. It was blazing hot that day, so they sweat a lot and they really stunk, but Jun Wu Hui still sucked the poison from the soldier's wound every hour to sustain his life. That was why they made it all the way to where they met me. Or else the soldier would have been long dead. I was really touched back then. How admirable a general he was if he did that for his soldiers. Dongfang Wen Xian's eyes revealed her sadness. But her smile was full of inexplicable gentleness, as if she was re-experiencing the past. Although Dongfang Wen Xian had been sleeping for 10 years, her thoughts remained unchanged during all those years. She had no idea that in those 10 years, much had changed, especially for the people around her. For her, all she had were still painful memories, which were still so intense. The old madam sighed and opened her mouth to speak. But she did not know how to comfort her daughter. She stood up and said, half blamingly, "Take care of your son first. He almost lost his life saving you. We will talk about the rest after he has recovered." Dongfang Wen Xian was pulled back to reality. She looked at her son lovingly. It was a familiar face, similar to the one that had taught her love. But of course, it was much younger. She gently bent down and touched Jun Moxie's face with hers. Then she said softly, "My dear son. Wu Hui's son. I must help Mo Xie recover. My third son. My third son." The old madam let out a sigh in her mind. She signaled at a few guys in the room, and Dongfang Wenqing and a few others exited unwillingly. The old madam stood up last and said, "When Mo Xie has recovered, Dongfang Wen Xian, you unfilial daughter, you better apologize to me properly. For so many years. You, sigh." She left after the long sigh. Now only Dongfang Wen Xian, Mei Shuiyan, and Jun Moxie remained in the room. Within the body of the unconscious Jun Moxie must be unbearable pain. But in his mother's lap, all that was on his face was happiness. Jun Moxie felt like he was living in paradise for the next few days. Dongfang Wen Xian took care of him with almost no rest. Even at night, she would build a small bed beside her son to sleep. She fed him every meal, which was initially awkward for Jun Moxie, but she insisted. He quickly gave in, soon starting to enjoy the endless care from his mother in her lap. As he smelled the nice and familiar scent of his mother and felt the joy of reunion, it was the first time he really knew happiness and dependency in his two lives. How great was it to have a mother! Cozy, comfortable, joyous. It was as if no adjectives in this word could even slightly describe the satisfaction of this moment. Jun Moxie. Moxie. the evil monarch, finally have a mother. I am finally someone that can enjoy mother's love. Jun Moxie was inexplicably excited. For these days, he talked to his mother every day. He talked about all those years' experiences, how he had misbehaved, and how he was totally spoiled, how he made people angry. It seemed that nothing, even the most ridiculous, could not be said. He would then enjoy the scolding and the gentle reprimanding from his mother. Then he would listen to his mother about how he had always been naughty when young, even when he was still in his mother's belly. Then she would talk about how she met his father, and how they began to know each other, fall in love, and so on. Jun Moxie would always listen quietly. Mei Shuyan would also sit at the side and listen with a smile. Strangely, Dongfang Wen Xie never talked about anything sad. She only picked the happy moments. Even her two other sons were seldom mentioned. The first time she mentioned them, Jun Moxie skillfully changed the topic. She was at first stunned, but stopped mentioning them afterwards. Although her grief and sorrow could still be seen in her face and eyes, but she never revealed it in front of her son. She cared for him to the most detailed extent. She would even take care of a single hair on Jun Moxie's head. It was as if she wanted to give all the absent mother's love to Moxie in a single day. She was devoted to her son. Jun Moxie even thought, how wonderful would it be if this can continue forever? He was reluctant to leave this experience behind. The people from the Dongfang family would visit every day. But they quickly left every time, and even the old madam was not an exception. They were afraid to see the grief and doubt in Dongfang Wen Xie's eyes. Even the old madam could not tell her the truth. Every time, they would leave Dongfang Wen Xie by the door still pondering. And the concern and the ominous feeling only grew as she pondered on. The immense pressure and the great grief of his mother was still felt by Jun Moxie. Although she tried very hard to cover them, he could still detect them. So, Jun Moxie finally decided to unveil the truth. It was better to let out the truth than for everyone to keep it. The pain would soon be washed away by an outburst of tears, and it would be much better than having his mother depressed every day. Of course, what really encouraged him to do so was what Mei Shuyan had said unintentionally when his mother was not around. She said that she could not bear seeing their mother suffer like this and how good it would be if the dead could be revived. Jun Moxie was moved. This story will be continued to chapter 621. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.